Alright guys, here is the ZG fender that's gonna be going on the car. Before I get started on the fender flare installation, let me tell you a little bit about why these are called ZG flares and why these are not really aftermarket. Back in the 70s, Nissan decided to compete these Z cars, and in order to be competitive, they wanted to put fatter tires in the back as well as up front. So what they came up with is a 240Z ZG edition. On the ZZ car, you'll notice that it's got the G nose up front, which is very much narrow and aerodynamic. It's got the headlight covers, but a true ZZ car was never produced outside of Japan. It's a Japan only edition. Although when I'm installing to the car, it's going to be aftermarket, it is a somewhat OEM dealer option. What I'm gonna do, and this is gonna piss off some of the purists, is cut off this beautiful arched flare, and then I'm gonna weld it, seal it, rivet it, mount the flare. So what I have here today is a ZZ flare replica. The reason why I say replica is because one, it's aftermarket, and for two, this is not the same size the stock ZZ flares came. Stock ZZ flare, or should I say OEM reproduction ZZ flares you see online today, are about 2.25 inches wider up front and 2.75 inches wider in the back. This one is actually 2 inches up front, so it's narrower on the front side, and 3 inch in the back, so a little bit wider on the back of the car. I wanted to do that just to have the rear stick out even more, or have the effect of the rear sticking out way farther than the front. As you can see here, I have the 8-inch wheel up front and it's not rubbing, so in theory I don't really need a fender up front. If I was to go wider, it's just gonna weigh the car even more, so I didn't think it was necessary to go any wider than what I have here today. I'll probably still have to run spacers up front so it looks more flush, and the rear I felt that wasn't wide enough on a stock ZZ setup, which is the reason why I went with this ZZ flare, which gives me 3 inch of width in the rear as opposed to the traditional 2.5 for the little extra stance. I'm sure you guys have seen the ridiculous setups where people run like 10-inch tire up front and like 14 or 13 inch in the back. Those cars are running a wide ZZ flares. That is 3.25 up front and 3.75 inches wider in the back. So, I mean, that's gonna come out to like here. Absolutely ridiculous. I don't want to run that simply because I think it's too wide for the car. The car already looks sexy as is. I feel bad for chopping it up, but I like aftermarket things. I like over fenders. I like the way they look, and I want to run bigger tires on this car without rubbing. And for those of you who are looking at wide ZZ flares and thinking of running them, please remember that wider rims are going to weigh more, it's going to cost more, and it's going to require wider tires, which are again going to weigh more and cost more, and so on and so forth. Unless you have like a car that's pushing more than 400, 500 wheel, I don't see the point of running wide ZZ fenders. That's the reason why I went with this aftermarket ZZ flares that's a little wider than stock ZZ, but not as wide as the wide ZZ flares. So today is yet another over fender installation day. I'm just gonna figure out where I wanna mount this. I'm gonna drill a hole on the over fender as well as on the frame, use Cleco pins to hold it in place, kind of outline where I want to cut it up, then go ahead and start grinding things off. So time lapse, here we go. Alright guys, so we have mocked up the fender up on the car. As you can see, I got the holes here for the mounting locations. Now, one thing I want to show you is these Cleco pins. I use this when I install the fender flares on the FD. It essentially goes inside and expands once it's attached so that you can temporarily fix your over fenders. You can use this on like a bumper or whatever body panel you're fitting on the car. And it's also very strong. I have driven a car before with Cleco pins holding the over fenders and I didn't fly off. So highly recommend getting one of these. I've driven up 2 lines, one for the top of the fender flare, one for the area I want to cut. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take out my angle grinder and start chopping this up. One thing I want to note though is you don't want to cut like deep in here because there's 2 layers. Because you have 2 sheets, one on the outside, one on the inside, you have to cut just the outside layer and then bend up the inner layer and weld the inner layer into the outer layer, and I'll show you how that works later. Alright guys, so this is where we're at now. I chopped out what needs to be chopped off. I cut slits this way vertically and then banged everything out so that it's nice and flush. You also want to grind the surface so you have this nice metal to weld onto. This is essentially what I cut up after I chopped off the outer layer, the arch, as you can see there. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and start welding this together so that everything is nice and sealed, and after that I'm going to go over everything with a sealer so it is actually sealed up, and then I should be finished with the job. I just feel horrible for cutting up a car in such a good condition, but whatever, it's my car. Alright guys, so the fender has been chopped, it's been welded, and the weld have been cleaned off, so there's no sharp metal pieces that might puncture the wheel. Everything looking good. So what you need to do now is seal this up, but before you seal it, you want to paint it. So I'm going to use a primer to just make sure this bare metal is all covered up so it doesn't start rusting. And then after that, what I'm gonna use is, there's 2 ways you can do this, I guess. One way to do this is go with a traditional seam sealer. It's basically a black silicone that's gonna go around the holes and make sure everything is watertight and sealed up. But what I found and what I prefer is to use a fiberglass bundle, something like this. Not only is it going to protect the fender well from future damage, it's also going to make it a little bit stronger. This is the stuff I like to use, and I'll show you how that's done. This stuff is kind of disgusting to work with because, as it says, bondo hair. It's like the hair that you scoop out of a drain, and then imagine mixing that with like a glue, because that's exactly how this stuff feels like. Alright guys, here we are. Looks disgusting now, but that's okay because it's going to be all covered under the fender flare. I'm going to come back in tomorrow and see how everything looks. Let it sit overnight. Alright guys, and we're back for another update. This is where we're at now. The fiberglass has dried up and I have sanded the surface down so there's no like debris or anything that's gonna stick into the tire and come off. And what I did was I started putting these walnuts in the fender. Now I'm using walnuts here today instead of rib nuts like I did on the RX-7, because this fender flares, when installed, is not exactly flush. It's not exactly parallel to the body of the vehicle. So what would have happened if I use rib nut is that because rib nuts are flush to the surface and come straight out like this, perpendicular, it's going to look crooked on the fender because there's no room to adjust. So that is the reason why I decided to use walnuts today, because walnuts, as you can see, when installed, has adjustability. You see the wiggle room there? And how these work is basically you insert the bolt from top here, and then pressure builds up, and then essentially bubbling out like that and clamping onto the fender. So that is how I'm going to install the over fenders on the 280Z. Let's see how it looks. Alright guys, and here is what the result looks like. I am not 100% finished though, let me just tell you that, because this is still unpainted. It's like the factory gloss that the fender flares came with, and I still want to run like a bit of sealant or protectant here, but I am pretty happy with the results so far. For this episode, I'm just gonna leave it as is, and then in the future episodes, I'm gonna start working on the front fender after the front bumper has been installed. So see you in the next episode. Peace.